got on the stage on May 12th, it was not like any other Mann Ki Baat. It was a message to the world. It was clear, it was deliberate, and it was final. Between 1993 and 2013, India faced several major terror attacks. Each time, India took the diplomatic route. We gave the world proof, imposed restrictions, and waited for someone to act. But nothing changed. The attack continued and innocents suffered. But this time, the entire world witnessed a shift. On April 22nd, 26 Hindu civilians were killed in a brutal terror attack in Pahelgam. They were not the enemies. They were not terrorists. They were not bad people. Their only fault was they were Hindus. But we didn't stay silent this time. We retaliated, and we retaliated back with Operation Sindoor, a name chosen to honor the blood that was spilled, a name that would change India's position in the map and in the leading world economies forever. In this video, we are breaking down how Operation Sindoor marks the beginning of the new story for India. A story in which India does not listen to the orders from the West. A story in which India takes charge of the global narrative. Let's explore what the media doesn't tell you, that how Operation Sindoor wasn't just about killing terrorists, but it was the perfect storm that helped put India on the global map. But to understand that, we need to rewind a little bit. On April 22nd, 2025, 26 Indian civilians were killed in a terror attack in Pahalgam, Kashmir. At first glance, it looked like just another cross-border incident, but it was not. This wasn't just a random attack by few armed infiltrators crossing the line of control to cause chaos. There was something different about it, something tactical. The terrorists didn't shoot in all directions or take indiscriminate hostages. They moved with precision. They selected their targets, civilians, tourists, Hindus, one by one, executed at close range. They had body cams on. They recorded everything. In some cases, they also took selfies with the victims. And before they disappeared across the border, they left a message.
मैंने उसे बोला मुझे भी मारो तूने मेरे पति को मारा मेरे सन में भी बोला तो उसने हमें नहीं मारा उसने बोला मोदी को बोलो.
It didn't feel like an act of terror. It felt like provocation, meant to corner India, force a response, and put the country in dilemma. They will not be spared, said Prime Minister Modi. People started to gain hope. They were fed up with the old ways of India staying silent. This is a new India, they thought. But nothing happened for days. No movements, no other statements, no action. But India did respond and did so tactfully. On May 5th, it was announced that India will conduct a nationwide civil defense mock drill, a message meant to portray that war is coming. Air sirens rang in 244 districts throughout the country. There were electric blackouts. India was preparing for an incoming attack. But suddenly, the tables turned. On May 7th, just before dawn, India launched Operation Sindoor. It lasted less than 30 minutes. 24 strikes, 9 terror camps, every target identified and verified, every missile accounted for. No prior public announcements, no media leaks, no posturing, just execution. Everyone was shocked, not just Indians, but the entire international community. Nobody had expected India to respond so fiercely and so skillfully. The internet was filled with joy and national pride. People for the first time felt that a deserved revenge was taken and justice was served. But less than 24 hours later, Pakistan responded with over 300 drones and missiles aimed at Indian base. It was one of the largest aerial attacks the region has ever seen. And this was the moment everyone expected things to go spiral. Social media flooded with rumors and speculation. Newsrooms speculated full-scale war. Panic crept in, but India was already ready. Every single threat was tracked, assigned, and neutralized without a single Indian base being hit. That night, India had every reason to call out a full-blown war, but it didn't. Instead, it acted with the same precision. A second wave of strikes was launched, this time aimed at Pakistan's military infrastructure, the specific airbase and radar system that had enabled the attack. The Noor Khan Air Base near Rawalpindi, located dangerously close to the Army's GHQ in Pakistan, was hit in a very first wave. India was deep inside Pakistan and there was nothing that could stop the wrath of Indian armed forces. 2 mobile command centers were taken out, a C-130 aircraft was destroyed on the ground. Far to the south, Rahim Yar Khan Air Base was rendered unusable after its runways, taxiways, and apron were blown away. In the span of 3 days, India was provoked, attacked, and challenged with a full-spectrum aerial assault. But India stayed resilient. We defended our borders and our people with pride and full forces of our defense systems. Some people criticized India for abandoning diplomacy. Others praised it for finally taking a stand, even if it meant risking a war. But it was neither of those things. This wasn't recklessness, and it wasn't impulse. It was calculated, limited, and deliberate. It was a strategic escalation. The kind of response that doesn't seek headlines but sends a message. And in many ways, it reflected the new narrative that India had been building over the past few years. A shift away from restraint but without losing control. One which changed the geopolitical narrative of India. Between 1993 and 2013, India faced more than 12 major terror attacks. These weren't isolated incidents or localized insurgencies. These were calculated, high-casualty operations, some targeting civilians, financial hubs, religious places, and public infrastructure. December 2021, terrorists stormed the Indian Parliament in broad daylight. 2006, 189 people killed and over 800 injured in coordinated bombing on Mumbai suburban railways. 2008, 10 terrorists laid siege to Mumbai for 3 days. 174 people dead, over 300 injured. After 26/11, the New York Times published a scathing headlines. It said, India's security forces are so spectacularly unprepared, its intelligence agencies so riven by conflict and miscommunication that it lacks the ability to respond adequately to such attacks, much less prevent them. And the truth is, it was accurate. So our standard response to terror at the time was diplomatic. We filed dossiers, we paused dialogues, we issued formal condemnation, we went to international forums and asked for sanctions, but we didn't retaliate. And over time, that began to define us. This hurt more than just our security narrative. It affected investors' confidence. When terror attacks are frequent and when a country looks hesitant or incapable of controlling them, it creates a perception of instability. In the years following 26/11, sectors like tourism, hospitality, and real estate saw direct FDI slowdowns. Financial analysts flagged India's risk profile as a concern. The message was very simple. A country that can't secure its people might not be able to secure investment either. But this narrative started to change in 2016 after 19 Indian soldiers were killed in the Uri attack. India carried out surgical strike across the line of control, and for the first time, India acknowledged publicly that it had crossed the border in response to a terror attack.
Indian Army conducted surgical strikes last night at these launch pads.
In 2019, after the Pulwama bombing that killed 40 CRPF Jawans, India launched the Balakot airstrike. This was a major escalation, the first time since 1971 that India has used air power to hit targets deep inside Pakistan. It signaled that cross-border terror would no longer be met with silence. Still, both Uri and Balakot were limited in scope. They were tightly managed, diplomatically sensitive, and reactive. India was still testing the boundaries of what it could do without triggering full-scale war or international backlash. Then came 2025. Operation Sindoor changed the playbook entirely. There was no delay, no diplomatic balancing act, no attempt to internationalize the response before taking action. India hit back within 15 days. It did so with full spectrum coordination, kept the airstrikes clean, and prevented any civilian casualties. And when Pakistan responded, India neutralized every incoming threats and followed up with another limited airstrike, not just to contain the threat, but to respond strategically. The difference this time was that India didn't look like a country reacting. It looked like a country that has planned for this scenario and executed it exactly the way it intended to. The recent data shows that the market is now immune to Indo-Pak tension, as FDI has remained positive and growing despite all conflicts. Because the image of India as a restrained, reactive state is outdated now. What you saw in Operation Sindoor wasn't a moment. It was the outcome of a long shift in doctrine, in mindset, and in the capability. The question now is, what made that shift possible? India's response in 2025 didn't come out of emotion. It came out of infrastructure. What the world saw as an instant retaliation was actually the result of years of planning, investment, and quiet reforms. After Uri and Pulwama, India showed a change in policy. We moved towards a new doctrine, proportional escalation. It's about showing that every hostile attack will have a direct, timely, and measured consequences. No overreaction, no silence either. Operation Sindoor was a textbook case. Targeted strikes, no civilian damage. A clear boundary. Provoke us and we will respond. Not with noise, but with action. But a doctrine means nothing without the capability to back it. And that's where the real shift happened in technology, systems, and structure. India has been quietly overhauling its defense infrastructure for decades. In 2025-26, our defense budget crossed 6.8 trillion. A record 1.46 trillion worth of equipment was produced within India, a number that was less than half just a few years ago. And for the first time, India's defense exports hit 23,600 crore, which is an increase, a 12% increase from the previous year. And now we are not just buying weapons, we are building them and we are selling them. Supersonic missiles, fighter jets, naval systems, even rifles. We are no longer a buyer in the global arms market. We are becoming a supplier. That shift started with policy. Through Make in India, we began a rapid expansion in fully or partially Indian-made weapons. India has set up 2 defense corridors to boost arms productions. Union Budget 2025 has increased FDI investments in defense sectors to 74% stake. And all of this has translated into new and better technologies. BrahMos, Akash, Tejas, Pinaka, Arjun, Astra, Nag. Joint ventures like Indo-Russia rifles for AK-203s, contracts with companies like L&T, Adani Defense, HAL, BEL. These aren't experiments anymore. They are mature systems in active service. And in 2025, they were tested. When India responded to the Pahelgam attack, it didn't just rely on airstrikes. It used a battlefield command system called Akash, a real-time AI-backed air defense network that integrated radar, satellite, and drone feeds across all 3 forces. And that's how India tracked 300 incoming aerial threats from Pakistan and shot down nearly everyone without a single base being hit. Add to that the S-400 missile system, Israeli Barak 8S, indigenous Swati radar system, and India's growing drone fleet, and you start to see the bigger picture. This isn't a developing power playing to catch up. This is a regional military built for speed, precision, and scale. And all of this is now coordinated because of one structural change: the creation of the Chief of Defense, CDS. For decades, the Army, Navy, and Air Force operated in silos. But now, under the CDS, planning is integrated. Drills are joined. Command is unified. And that's how you execute a mission like Operation Sindoor in just 3 days across 3 services without leaks or overlaps. And finally, the biggest shift wasn't in equipments or rank. It was in decision making. Today, India's security architecture is centralized. The Prime Minister's office, the National Security Advisor, the CDS, and intelligence agencies operate on real-time loops. Mission approvals don't take days, they take hours. And every alert feeds into a structure that's been rehearsed for moments like these. So what looked like a clean, controlled airstrike in May 2025 was actually the outcome of 10 years of investment, not just in weapons, but in systems, in leadership, and in thinking. This wasn't a one-off. It was a new standard, and the world was listening. Our markets not just held strong, but thrived, and investors' trust has increased significantly. Operation Sindoor was proof that India had the will, the systems, and the capability to protect its people. And for the first time, the world didn't ask India to hold back. After the 2019 Balakot strike, there were calls for de-escalations within hours. International media framed it as a nuclear flashpoint. But in 2025, when India launched back-to-back airstrikes against terrorist camps in POK and across the borders, there were no emergency summits, no backlash. In fact, for the first time, the support was public. France, the UK, Israel, and Netherlands all backed India's right to self-defense. Even the US response was measured. No pressure, no lectures. And this wasn't just a diplomatic alignment, it was an acknowledgement that India had responded with restraint, that the strike was clean, that it targeted terrorists, not civilians, not infrastructure, not provocation. And it wasn't just global politics that responded, markets did too. In 2008, after 26/11, investor sentiments dropped. Risk premiums were recalculated because at that time, India didn't look like a country that could defend itself without global help. But after Operation Sindoor, barely a ripple. Stock indices held steady. Foreign institutional investment flows stayed stable. Why? Because India didn't look vulnerable anymore. It looked capable. This strike didn't just hit terror camps. It dismantled a narrative that India would always respond late, respond weak, or respond through others. And Pakistan, they very quickly shifted to back channels, quiet conversations with global partners to de-escalate. That silence said more than any statement. But the real shift happened in perception, not just of India's power, but of its posture. Because this time, India didn't need to justify what it did. It didn't need to run a global PR campaign. It didn't ask the world to understand. It acted, and the world understood on its own. This is what a credible deterrent looks like. India proved that it wasn't just a rising economy. It was a state that could protect itself without waiting for permissions, without fearing isolations. And in geopolitics, that's not just power, that's positioning. India didn't just end a terrorist threat with Operation Sindoor. It ended a global perception. It changed its story about being a country. This operation marked the moment when India wasn't just seen as capable of defending its people, but as a country that had the systems, the scale, and the vision to do it consistently. And now the numbers are backing the shift. In 2013, India's total defense exports were 686 crore. In 2024-25, that number stood at 23,622 crore. And that's not a rise. That's a 34-fold jump in just over a decade. Defense production also hit an all-time high with 146 lakh crore in financial year 2025, which is up from 1.27 lakh crore in the year before. And it is not just state-run firms. Over 32,000 crore of that came from private Indian companies. That includes joint ventures, public-private R&D, and full-scale manufacturing. India's defense industry isn't just growing, it is evolving, and the world is watching. Countries that once only saw India as a buyer are now buying from India. India signed a $375 million BrahMos missile deal with the Philippines. In fact, after Operation Sindoor, countries like Thailand, UAE, Singapore are all lining up to buy BrahMos. Not only that, India is now the biggest arms suppliers to Armenia. But the shift goes deeper than numbers. That's why in the middle of this, India greenlit AMCA, a fifth-generation stealth fighter built in India for Indian needs. No imports, no dependencies, and no compromises. And it's not just a one-off. Even the world wants to participate. Russia has proposed to co-develop S-500 in partnership with India. The vision now is 2047. That's when India plans to take its defense production to 8.8 lakh crore and its defense exports 2.8 lakh crore, roughly 120 times what they were just a decade ago. India is becoming a growing ecosystem of research hubs, private suppliers, military-grade innovation parks, and tactical AI integration. But here's the bigger picture. Operation Sindoor didn't just tell the world that India can strike. It has rewritten the image of India. When Prime Minister Modi got on the stage to say water and blood will not flow together, he sent a message not just to Pakistan, but to the entire world, to every country that still saw India as a slow-moving, reactive state. It showed India has the budget, the technologies, the capacity, and the intent to protect and stand its ground. India showed to our allies, our investors, that their confidence isn't shaken anymore. And to our potential enemies, we proved that India is impenetrable. Sindur wasn't just a one-time operation. From now on, it is the standard.